So now I'll bring everyone in from the waiting room. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the audiobook launch for The Wretched and Undone. I'm really glad that you could join us, and I'm really excited to officially launch the audiobook for The Wretched and Undone. My name is Colin Mustful. I'm the founder and editor of History Through Fiction. With us is the author of The Wretched and Undone, J.E. Weiner, and the narrator, Scott Fleming. We're going to hear plenty from them here throughout this event. Just a few housekeeping things before we get going. Your cameras can be open or closed. It's totally up to you. I've disabled the mics, so if you have a question, please just drop that in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat throughout this event. And please say hello, let us know where you're joining us from. We'd love to just have you introduce yourselves. Also, I just wanted to let you know about the distribution for this audiobook. It is distributed with Authors Republic, which means it goes out to Libro FM, and Libro FM is kind of like bookshop.org. They give back to independent bookstores. You can buy the audiobook from an independent bookstore, so whatever indie bookstore you prefer, you can actually ask them for the audiobook and they'll get it for you from Libro FM. The book is also distributed to libraries through Hoopla and through Overdrive. I have the Libby app on my phone, and that's where I get my audiobooks from the library, and you can do the same. And we actually get revenue from those downloads from libraries. So if you can't afford the audiobook right now, you can borrow it from your library and the author will get compensated for that, plus the libraries. And so we would really appreciate if you do that. One other thing is if you have read the audiobook, we would love your review. So just go to Goodreads, go to Amazon, go to Barnes & Noble, wherever you do your book reviews, and we would love to have you post a review for The Wretched and Undone. Okay, without further ado, let me welcome J.E. Weiner, the author of The Wretched and Undone. Julia, if you could just say hello.
All right. Well, that's your first insider is that JE. I go by Julia as well, so thanks for that. I'm really thrilled. This has just been a project, a passion project for me, both the book and the audiobook. And it has just being able to hear not my own voice speaking out loud as I write dialogue, creating an audio version of this story. It really brought to life in ways I didn't even expect the lives of my characters. And we can get into a little bit more of that, but I'm thrilled to be here today and to share Scott's talents with the world because it's been a really wonderful journey so far. Thank you.
And then we also have the narrator, Scott Fleming. Scott, hi.
Hi there. How is it? I hope everyone's well. Thank you for joining us tonight, or this afternoon, or this morning, wherever you are. I'm in the UK, so it's 9 o'clock at night here.
I'm going to have a bunch of questions for both Scott and Julia. If you have a question, please go ahead and post it in the chat. I will monitor that throughout the event. So to get us started, I wanted to ask Julia, what is special about doing an audiobook? How does that add a level of life to this novel, to your characters? How did it feel listening to it after Scott narrated it?
So like I said, it was almost unfolding a different layer to the words that were on the page that were so already seared into my brain, but just to hear someone else interpret them and bring them to life was one of the most special things for me. It was also, I think the book on the page has a lot of visual elements to it, and it just added another dimension to have the voices and the description heard aloud. That was really, I think, the most special for me.
Did you get emotional at all just hearing your work played out in audio?
Yes, and I will say that the moment that took my breath away was when I hit one of the chapters where I've infused music, and that Scott had gone and found these old songs, learned them, and then he sang them in the text. That was a moment that I got really choked up. Music's a really important part of the latter part of the book, so I really appreciated that.
And Scott, what were some of the challenges for you? First, maybe give us a little background into your experience as an audiobook narrator,
Yeah.
and what did you enjoy about The Wretched and Undone, and what were some of the challenges of narrating it?
I think the challenges were obviously the amount of characters and the different accents, which is one of my strengths, but obviously making them believable. There's always someone who's going to say, you're never going to be exactly in terms of the accent because I'm not from there. So it's giving it clarity, pronunciations, certainly from the Polish perspective, and making sure they're writers, because obviously there's so many different ways to say it depending on which part of the country you might be from. So Julia had a friend that was sort of helping with pronunciation, which really helped. So yeah, I've been doing audiobooks for 4 to 5 years. I have about 120 plus titles on Audible, and as you can tell, I'm from the UK. But about half my books have been in American. So I I've played I played Buddy Holly on stage because I'm an active musician as well. So I kind of know a little bit about it in terms of trying to get that Southern accent. So yeah, I think the challenge is there was so many different characters of different ages, of gender, and from background. So as much as a challenge, it was really enjoyable to do, and great, strong writing to narrate with wonderful, well-rounded characters, and hopefully, that's come across, when people listen to it. You appreciate it's one voice, but every character needs to have life and needs to breathe and be as realistic and as real to the listener as possible.
You mentioned that the Onderwalds are Polish, and that made me wonder the additional level of research that goes into this because, for instance, my ancestors came to this country in the early 1900s, Scandinavian. Over time, their accent kind of dissipates until now you have my accent, which is a Midwestern one. Like, how do you know how heavy to go with Polish versus American? Do you have to look at the exact, like, how many years they've been in this country? How do you
Yeah.
handle that?
Well, Julia put that down. So we had the different parts. Okay, now we've jumped a certain amount of time. So now this person has pretty much lost their accent. The children, say the third generation, wouldn't be speaking. Uh, they would be speaking more American anyway. Funnily, and one of the other books I've just finished is Peter Victorious, by Olav Rolvag, and so that was about the Norwegians coming across to the Dakotas. So again, when it got to the next generation, they were speaking American, and they only really wanted to speak American and were taught American in American schools. So yeah, that's part of the process with the character of Zacharias, is that as he goes through, he starts off as Polish with his father, but then as it goes further forward, he's more American, and so is his son. So with Luke, so it's a challenge, but again, you're given pointers from the author, which really helps.
Well, Julia, how much work was involved for you? Like, obviously, you had to give him these notes. Was that were you prepared for that, or you're like, wow, I really need to go in a deeper and not just do character background so I can write this novel, but now I have to do character background so I can help Scott with that. How was that for you?
Well, I think any author will probably tell you that they so embraced the characters that they write on. I mean, I know everything about these characters. I know more than they know about themselves because I created them. And so for me, yes, I had to go back through and make sure that we got it right, just because I want to do right by the accents. I want to do right by the historical accuracy. But I also, I birthed them. I wanted this to be right. I wanted this to be perfect. So I was incented to do it. It wasn't hard work. It was work, but it was because I wanted it to be right. And I think for the most part, we got there.
Well, we've keyed up a number of excerpts for Scott to perform live for us. So let's go ahead and do the first one. Julie, if you could let our audience give a little context for that first excerpt.
Sure. So this is chapter one. It comes after the prologue, which has been out there as a teaser for the book for a little bit. But this is really sets the stage for the first generation. It's the part of the book where Marcin and Agnieszka have arrived from Poland on the eve of the Civil War, fleeing poverty, chaos, violence, only to find just as much poverty and maybe a little bit more chaos and violence in the world that they stumble into in Texas. And so this is soon after their arrival, and it tees up the mood of the book, if you will, for the rest of the narrative.
Whenever you're ready, Scott.
Cool. Chapter 1. In the beginning. The first whiff of trouble for the Anibald family swirled on a sweltering Sunday in July 1860, when a rattlesnake dropped out of the rafters during Mass at St. Stanislaus Catholic Church. Father Peter Mazurek was already sideways of his exhausted congregation that morning as he attempted to deliver his sermon. The priest's letters home to the villages of Upper Silesia had promised an exotic new world of faith, fertile soil, and freedom in this land called Texas. But it had been 5 long years of hardship and misery for one and all. Doubts had arisen, and more than a few parishioners blamed Father Mazurek for their trials and tribulations. Lately, there was talk he had mismanaged some of the church's funds. While the flock would never falter in its faith in the good Lord, their confidence in the good Father waned. "Dear friends," the priest began, mopping his brow with the greasy hem of his vestment. "Father sure has got his dander up," a boy titted in the back. "Yeah, a full chisel. You'd think the Pope himself was here," another replied. Marcin Andevald heard this exchange and half hid a smile behind his hand. His wife Agnieszka reprimanded him with a sharp look and a sharper elbow, her patience nearly depleted in the last month of her 4th pregnancy in less than 5 years. "Ow!" Marcin mouthed with a scowl. "I am reminded of John the Baptist's return from the wilderness," Father Mazurek forged on, his jowls dripping with sweat and his slight falsetto rising. "He preached that for those who make ready for the way of the Lord, every valley shall be filled, and every mountain and hill shall be brought low." The congregants stirred in their seats, and a quiet grumble began to build among the pews. "We need work, Father, not empty promises," one man said. "I beseech you," the priest replied. "I know this past year has been difficult, but God will reward our efforts. Our hardship will soon be behind us." "Or 6 feet above," another woman cried. Father Mazurek frantically looked around the room in search of the hecklers. The cleric frowned and opened his mouth, but appeared to reconsider the rebuke he was poised to issue. He pressed a chubby fist against his lips and cleared his throat. "The Lord will show us," he started again, but was cut short by a loud swish exploding from above. All eyes darted to the rafters above the priest's head. Sound muted and time slowed as a giant diamondback tumbled through the air and landed smack dab in the middle of the altar. The church's prized silver chalice and candlesticks scattered across the floor. The snake was stunned for the briefest of moments before it curled into a warning posture, its rattle announcing an intent to strike. The ominous buzzing ricocheted off the bare log frame walls of the makeshift sanctuary, as if a legion of serpents had alighted upon the gathering. "Bozia moi!" Father Mazurek screamed and tumbled forward, landing on an elderly woman in the front row, his face smashed between her ample thighs. "It's the devil!" she wailed. Parishioners recoiled in panic, some crawling on their hands and knees until they could reach their feet. Marcin pulled his 3 young children onto the bench and threw himself across Agnieszka's swollen belly. "Tato, what's happening?" the eldest child, Zacharias, said, clutching his father's arm. "Mamusiu!" His younger sisters, Victoria and Beata, bleated like startled lambs. Marcin could feel Agnieszka's petite frame trembling beneath him. "Stay calm, Aga," he said, and leaned into the center aisle, blood pulsing behind his eardrums. Marcin watched the serpent slide over the altar's edge onto the floor. The rattler gently lifted its head and advanced, its forked tongue navigating the distance between them. A burst of white light glanced off one of the candlesticks lodged under the opposite pew and distracted Marchand's attention. He lunged from his seat and with one swift arc of his muscled arm grabbed the altar ornament and brought its heavy base down with a thunderous crash, severing the snake's head with one blow. Complete silence fell over the church. Marchand remained perfectly still, watching the snake's blood ooze around the tips of his boots and between the cracks in the floorboards. "It's a sign!" somebody shrieked at the rear, and the congregation sprang back to life. Agnieszka grabbed Marchand's wrist. Her ragged fingernails tore at his skin. "We must leave this place," she panted. "Yes, we will go," Marchand replied, but his attention remained fixed on the dead reptile at his feet. "Now!" Agnieszka insisted. "The baby! It is coming!"
Wow, that's such an amazing talent. I can't. Thank you for doing that, Scott.
You're welcome.
Noticed you at times are throwing your voice, for the shouting and people in the back and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, have you done, I mean, it was almost like a one-man show. You said you were in theater. Have you done one-man shows before?
No, I don't suppose I have. I think what I've done is storytelling, being a father. And my son, he's not in any performing at all. He's a computer scientist. He was the kind of catalyst for all of this, really, because he said, you've got this voice, Dad, and you do all the accents, but you've never done anything with it. And I had done some recording for education, but I'd never done any storybooks and audiobooks. So it was a kind of an unused talent, really. So it's been a real blessing, and I feel very, very grateful to be able to, to have authors like Julia actually trust me to tell their stories. And it's also being a singer and a musician, and Julia mentioned the music. That's something that, again, it happens quite often. Actually, I've had a few books where you think, oh right, yeah, I'll sing that song, and when you're writing it, you don't really think about it. How am I going to do that? So then it's having that ability as well to go in and go, okay, I've got the tune, I can do the lyrics that are written on the page. So yeah, my history is theatre. I trained as an actor in the mid-90s and worked in the West End. But it's different because it's a different skill set. You're using a lot of your pronunciation skills, but it's much more intimate. And so I've done a bit of radio and a bit of, as I say, a bit of kind of voiceovers for educational material. But also being able to do, I was brought up in a hotel in the West Country, so I got a lot of different accents, and you get to know the difference at a very young age between the Canadian and American, between New Zealand and Australian. So I was getting accents from all over, and being musical, okay, they're never going to be absolutely perfect because someone living in Bandera, I see someone was there, will say that's not the accent. So it's as long as the story is told and it's not caricature, then I think it works. It won't work for everyone, but I think the majority of people, it's about the story. And that's what I try and portray with my narration.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that talent with us. I couldn't wipe the smile from my face while you're reading.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to post a link to the audiobook on Libro FM. Like I had said earlier, Libro FM donates portions of their proceeds to independent bookstores, or they work with independent bookstores. So we like to support them as much as we can. For those who joined us late, please say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. We're going to get to another excerpt, but let's give Scott a little bit of a rest first. Linda asks, first, Linda, if you could write in the chat, I've not heard of writing.ie, so maybe let us know what that is. But she says, it seems like the happening upon the idea of the Wretched and Undone was unplanned. And I'm wondering if you had in mind, even before you were ever in Bandera, to write a Gothic horror novel, and what Julia, too, if you could actually kind of define the genre of the Wretched and Undone for us. And then she also asked, what is your favorite genre?
Yeah. So I did not set out to write a story in any particular genre. I set out just to write a story that had been bumping around in my brain for about 10 years. It was sparked by traveling to Bandera, which I did quite a bit with young kids visiting my sister who lived in between Bandera and Medina along Texas Highway 16 for a number of years on the ranch that inspired Peacock Bend, which is the ranch in the book. And so it was a combination of some concentric circles and two friends, distance from my specific family, but just stories that I had heard. And and there was a good old ghost story on this ranch, a woman in white who used to appear to very rational people who I'd never would have bet believed in ghosts, but certainly did after they encountered this whatever she was. And so that all came together in a story that I then made up. But it was very much informed by many visits to Bandera. If you have not been there, it is a small place. It's off the beaten track. It's not on a railroad stop, but it is a really charming crucible of time and place in the Texas Hill Country, which is really special. And there's just something there about it. I can't quite seem to not stop thinking about it since my next book is going to be set in near Bandera as well. So it really was a story that was generated by a place and a couple of circumstances. Southern Gothic, that is a genre that once I had written the story that I wanted to write, it took me a while. I was bumping around too, thinking about genres. And I had originally thought I was writing a Western or a historical fiction with a Western flavor to it. But as the sort of supernatural elements, as the sort of wrestling with just the fate that falls upon many of us as mortals, and the notion that there are forces out there beyond our control, good, bad, and otherwise. I realized that was really falling into the genre of Southern Gothic, which is, I think the most popular is probably Gone with the Wind, but you think about Cormac McCarthy, which is a harder edged version of sort of Western and Southern Gothic together. Flannery O'Connor would be another writer who writes in this genre. I really see it as a mashup of those three. So Western, Southern Gothic, historical fiction. And then there's something very special in Texas, which is newer. It's sort of this Texas noir. It's usually a crime novel, but I do feel like some of the elements of that dark and twisted sort of Texas element to it crept in as well. So genre came after my just telling the story that I was going to tell, and so it was a little bit organic. It wasn't intentional.
And you talk about visiting Bandera. You did get a chance to go down there and do an event. How did that go?
That was amazing. There is a museum there, which is just, if you go to Bandera only to go to the Frontier Times Museum, it's absolutely worth it. There was a early days, J.M. Hunter was a newspaper man who ended up in Bandera. He started the first newspaper in Bandera, and he also just had a love of the region. And over the course of about 30 years of his life, he chronicled the lives through oral histories, through written histories, through collecting memorabilia and pictures of the founding families. They're pretty impressive. These 12 people came over on a steamship. They landed in the middle of nowhere and they built a town out of nothing. They were also at the crossroads of the Civil War, batted between the Union and the Confederacy. They were always in dire conflict with native tribes who lived in the area, namely the Comanche, who were an incredibly powerful force in the region, and there was a lot of conflict there. So it was just this really interesting time and place. And then this really interesting man who collected all of this. And he wrote a magazine over the course of the 20s called the Frontier Times Magazine, where he chronicled a lot of these stories as well. That museum has collected many of these documents and pictures and other things. And then they have continued to collect things from Bandera's history. So that's where the book starts. It starts in this museum. A character comes and says, I've just bought a ranch. I don't know what's going on. But the older gentleman behind the counter says, well, I could probably tell you a thing or two. And it takes off from there. So they hosted me for an event, and a number of the families came and cheered me on. And at least they didn't tell me I got it wrong, which I was happy about.
Yeah, well, they must have adored you. That must have been so much fun.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot.
I see that Diane just downloaded the audiobook from Hoopla, so thank you, Diane. If anybody wants to pause for a second, grab their phone, and we won't be offended. You can get it on Libby or on Hoopla. And if you get it from the library, that you are supporting the library, the author, and the publisher. So that's awesome. All right, let's bring Scott back on for another excerpt. Julie, if you could introduce it.
Sure. So this comes from the second book, or the second part of the book, and it opens at a ball called the Bandera Ball, which is an actual thing that used to happen, and they would decorate the courthouse in the middle of town, and that's where really all the young people used to come. It was a big dance. It was a social event of the season, usually every spring, and so there was always live music and a band. This is a scene where John Marchand, who is a teenager, comes with his two best buddies for the big dance. And he meets Anna, who is the love interest in his life, at the dance. And she is performing with her brother's band on stage. And this is the first time that these two characters meet.
Anna Schulte was beguiling and elusive at the same time. John Marchand tried to conjure up what Frankie might say next. He shifted on his feet. So, do you want to get some punch? Was all he could think to ask. Anna laughed. I want a drink, but not punch. Come with me. She looped her arm through John Marchand's and guided him across the front of the stage toward the exit. He noticed Anna's brother Albert watching them. Catch me if you can, she said, and pushed John Marchand aside, racing down the stairs ahead of him. Wait for me, he cried. John Marchand was willing to play whatever game this enchanting girl had in mind. He followed her to the lobby. She was nowhere to be seen. He continued outside onto the courthouse's front lawn. Looking left, John Marchand saw no one, but to the right he spotted Anna as she rounded the building. He caught up to her behind the courthouse, where a large wagon was parked. She was rooting around in her carpet bag in the back. Aha! Here we go! Even better than punch, she said, waving a flask. Let's find a quiet place for a real drink. Want to go for a ride? John Marchand offered. If there was ever a time to show off Granddaddy's Standard's Model T, this was it. I have my grandfather's automobile. When he saw Anna's look of shock, he laughed and said, Ha ha, time for a real ride. John Marchand grabbed Anna's hand and led her to the car. I've always wanted to ride in one of these, she said. Where would you like to go? Wherever you see fit to take me, John Marchand Andevald, she replied with a coquettish curtsy. John Marchand opened the passenger door for Anna and climbed behind the wheel. They sped toward the river. Anna leaned out through the window, the air coursing through her hair. Stop here, she ordered when they reached the river bank. John Marchand parked in a grove of trees, and they sat in silence, looking out over the water glinting in the dappled moonlight. How about that drink? Anna broke the awkward silence, kicking off her shoes and unscrewing the top of the flask. She took 2 large swallows and offered John Marchand a turn. He took a quick sip and began to cough. I'm not much of a drinker, he confessed. Great, more for me, Anna said, and grabbed the flask back. You might want to take it easy there, John Marchand suggested, but quickly realized he'd overstepped. Anna glared at him. I'm sorry, he fumbled. I'm sorry, she mocked him like an insolent child. Aren't you the goody two-shoes? Your mama must be so proud. John Marchand wasn't sure what to say. He gripped the steering wheel. Anna swung her stocking-covered feet onto the seat and pulled up onto her knees, her whole body facing him, head cocked to the side. She stared at John Marchand. What? He asked. Anna's only response was to take another slug of whatever they were drinking. John Marchand opened his mouth to speak again, but before he could say a word, Anna bent forward and kissed him full on the mouth. Her lips were soft and wet, and she tasted of alcohol. It was his first kiss, but clearly not hers. Anna leaned back. Are we done fighting? Who said we were fighting? John Marchand was confused and could not contain his exasperation. Feels like we were, Anna said, and the cloud descended between them. We should be getting back, John Marchand started to say, but Anna burst into tears. What's wrong? He asked, reaching across the seat. Anna pushed his hand away and shook her head. I'm sorry. I've had too much to drink. Her voice cracked. Things like this always happen when I drink. John Marchand withdrew a handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to Anna. I didn't mean to upset you. Thank you, she sniffed, dabbing her face. You're right. We should go.
Thank you, Scott. A little bit of foreshadowing maybe there, Julia.
It doesn't get any better.
Yeah.
Well, I want to take this opportunity to actually, we had some folks who posted questions prior to the event. So one of those questions was actually about like the nuts and bolts. How long does it take to produce the audiobook? What kind of audio editing is involved? So maybe between both Julia and Scott, can you talk a little bit about the actual production, the timeline, what the process is like?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, there's an audition process, usually, unless people know me and come back to me from a series of books. Something like this is a standalone. So I would audition, which you'd ask me to do. And then that audition process will take in some different characters, the main narration, but also some characters like we just had, some dialogue, male and female. And if there is any specific accents like Polish that need to be heard, then that would be in the audition process. The audition process doesn't need to be reams and reams. It can just be a few lines here and there. The author's going to make their mind up pretty quickly. I think they're going to get a sense of what it's going to feel like, what the sound quality is like. And then once that happens, and you said yes, we'd like to employ you, so then it would then usually go forward into a longer section for a first checkpoint. It can be the first chapter, or if there is any other voices that need to be heard. Because once that first checkpoint is done, then there isn't a lot of time for re-editing. If we were in a studio situation, then there would be a lot more preparation, and you would do the book with the author, sometimes in situ, if they wanted to do that. More often than not, the author's not involved. So with this process, which I like better, is that then the editing process, or if there are any pickups, rather than recording the whole book, which has happened before, and then a wrong accent or a name has been mispronounced, that it can be an absolute nightmare, because you'd be talking about hundreds and hundreds of edits, certainly if it's the main name. So you say it was Marcin Underwald, and we're saying Marcin Underwald, then those kind of things need to be, from my perspective, I'll say, right, can you just confirm how you want this said, what the pronunciations are? There's always going to be stuff that falls through the net, but more often than not, that means that we can go through chapter by chapter. So I might say to Julia, right, I put the first chapters up online. You can listen through and then give me any edits that you have, which is what happened. So we did that moving along the next 5 chapters or the next 10 chapters, or the next 2 hours of audio, let's say. And I think it was around about 10 hours, wasn't it? I think something along those lines. So it gives us then if there are any idiosyncrasies, I think it was is it Huron? I can't remember. There was one of the pronunciations of one of the places was slightly off, so I had to go back and make those changes. But again, just because there are so many different ways to say it, it's always good to get the authors to say, how do you want this said? Because it doesn't really matter what other people say, it's how you want it. So yeah, and then the process of recording, what you work on is a per finished hour rate. So to create 1 hour, it might take 3 or 4 hours of work, including preparation and recording and editing. So yeah, it would be about 35 to 40 hours of my work to create a 10-hour book.
Well, I think about the selection we picked for the auditions, and in that selection, we had a Polish character, a young character, an old character, an Arab character, and it was a lot of back and forth dialogue peppered with description. So it was not an easy audition. And when I got a first series of audition tape or whatever recordings, one of the questions I had to ask myself is, can I listen to this voice for 10 hours? And there are lots of people who think they can do a Texas accent, but it's not. You can't. It is very much precise. And so I'm like sort of, when I hear it, I know it kind of person. And Scott was sort of on the tail end of the group of recordings that I listened to, and from the first sentence, I was like, "That's it. He's the narrator." And then he was able to agilely get through that pretty tricky series of things without having any context from me yet. So that was really kind of what inked it. But it only took about 2 minutes of listening to him.
And Scott Hawley asks about the sound design, the actual production of the audio. Do you work with someone to do that?
No, because my background is in music, and so I have a good understanding of production. So I have my own booth, which is soundproofed. So the noise floor is really low, and that's what you'll listen to some that might have gone into a studio for that continuity. But it's much easier for me than if there are any edits, I can do all the pickups myself. I think there was an occasion.
Can you define pickups for us?
Yeah, of course. So you might hear me when I do mistakes here. We use most narrators will use a system called punch and roll. So you will keep reading until you make a mistake. Then you go back before the mistake to a place where you can punch in, and then you carry on until you make the next mistake. So then you'll have, let's say you've got a 10-minute chapter, you might have 15 takes in there. Then you would go through and make sure there was no clicks when where you punched in, and then you would well, you can listen back to it in double time, or now you've got, which for this one I did, some you can put it into something called Positron. And what Positron is a piece of software where you upload your audio and you upload your text, and it marries the two, and it tells you if you've said any words wrong, which can be difficult if you're doing a book like this, because obviously there's so many unpronounced words in terms of Polish. Now you can always put them all in, but it's more of a case of how quickly you want to edit. And with this, it was going to be a lot easier to just upload and do all the editing myself. Some people outsource that, but again, it's more of a case of cost, but also how close you are to the material. And I think for me, I tend to do my own editing and proofing. I might send it off to sometimes to other people to proof, but more often than not now with Positron, that's really good. It's not 100%, but then again, if I was listening to it, that's a lot of energy and a lot of concentration for the narrator. I'd much rather be narrating rather than editing. So it's trying to make that process as smooth as possible, but also making sure that the story is being told. So again, with pickups, it's trying to make them as seamless as possible. You might hear it if you listen to an audiobook close enough where you think, oh, that voice is slightly different there. Yeah, they've done that sentence again, but on a different day and different time. So that's my skill, is trying to get my pitch of my voice exactly the same if I've said a word wrong, so I can just drop that little small section of sentence in, that it's seamless. And that's that skill, and that takes time to learn and to execute well.
Well, it really is amazing all the work that goes into an audiobook. And just to give a full picture, as a publisher, I'm involved in putting the book up for audition and choosing that selection to have an audition for. And as Scott said, like, I just put up a new title on Audible ACX, and there's 30, 40 auditions. I don't have time to listen to all 5 minutes of every audition. So sometimes it's only 15 seconds. And like Scott said, and then on the back end,
do I need to upload that? Because I didn't realize.
I've got that. I've sent it on to the author, so we're good there. Then on the back end, and Julia knows how frustrated I was because I had trouble with the metadata. I have to put in the retail description, the ISBN. I've got to work with the cover designer to create a square cover, and just getting all that data right, and and the files too. They're big files. They come chapter by chapter. They've got to be in order. They've got to be accepted. In fact, Scott and I had to work back and forth on this because the files were good for Audible ACX, but they weren't good for Authors Republic. So it's just incredible the amount of work that goes in from all of us. So thank you to everyone who is supporting us just by being here, by listening to the book, by talking about the book. I see Emily ordered it. Thank you so much. We really love that kind of support. And I'm glad that we get a chance to kind of share what what is the background of all this that kind of goes into it? Julie, one of the questions I was posted before the chat, and I want to remind everybody, if you do have a question, go ahead and post that in the chat, and I can ask. Somebody did ask about the title. How did you come up with it? Was it always in your head, or can you talk about that?
So the way I came up with it was from an old hymn from the 1850s, early 1860s that I'd stumbled upon. And that was in the research portion of the book. And I'm very, I'm very specific about names and why I choose them. And many of the times, the names that I choose are metaphor for the character themselves. And so I had just been doing some research in the book of Luke, actually. And if you're so inclined and you pick up the book of Luke, the narrator in the Bible was very much the inspiration for the narrator here, just as a sidebar. But also, I stumbled upon some hymns of the time, and this just seemed to fit the bill in all senses of the word. I'd written most of the book before I found the hymn, and I had an early developmental editor who's one of my teachers who said, your title has to have heat. You got to have heat in the title. It's really important. And this felt pretty hot. So that's just jumped out to me, but it is from an old time hymn.
At what point in the writing process did that strike you?
I think once, I'd gotten into the darker part of the book, which, well, there's several dark parts of the book, but probably about 2/3 of the way through, I was like, these poor people, what they're just so, I mean, is there any end to this? And yes, there is. It is, even though it's called The Wretched and Undone, it does get hopeful. Families can help each other through the most terrible of traumas, but it just struck me that it needed a title with that kind of weight to it.
Well, we've got one more excerpt from Scott. So, Julia, if you could introduce that.
Sure. So this comes from the third part of the book, and that is very much centered on the character of Luke, who is the son of John Marchand and Anna. He is the man about town. He's the high school athlete, superstar. He's handsome, he's dashing, but he is troubled. And he may be the most wretched of them all. And this is a scene that takes place soon after Anna has left. She's disappeared, and no one knows where she's gone, and she's not coming back. And they're coming to terms with that. Luke is in high school, and this is just sort of the fallout of his mother's disappearance. It's the start of the fallout of his mother's disappearance.
John Marchand held his breath whenever Luke took off in Anna's truck to meet his friends, though. Every weekend looked the same for the young people of Bandera in those days, cruising down Main Street and boozing around bonfires along the Medina. Occasionally, one of the kids would host a barn party, and word spread like wildfire through the school cafeteria. At the start of Luke's senior year at Bandera High, Felix Knapp's old cowshed burned down after someone tripped over a kerosene lamp during an exceptionally rambunctious gathering. Bandera County Sheriff Garrison Hicks and his deputies shifted into high alert. Sheriff Hicks personally took the time to visit the alleged ringleaders and their parents at home. The next kid I catch doing something stupid like this is going to spend a night or maybe even two in the old jailhouse. We'll see how you like sharing a cell with all the ghosts and the rats, Hicks threatened, standing over Luke in the parlor at Peacock Bend. Luke was sprawled on the sofa, his feet propped up on the copy table. You gotta be kidding me. Can't load this tough guy, he snickered. John Marchand gave him a sharp shove with his boot. Son, you best show the sheriff some respect. Luke couldn't contain a loud snort. John Marchand was losing patience. You think this is some kind of a joke? Luke Andervald, I assure you I'm quite serious. The sheriff took a step forward. Luke sat up straight. My apologies, sir. Forgive the interruption, he said with a salute. That's enough out of you, Mr. Andervald. Sheriff Hicks glared at Luke. Why don't you save some of that sass for the game against El Dorado this weekend, eh? Yes, Sheriff, Luke said with a hint of deference, and sat back in his seat, clearly aware of when not to push it. Hicks pulled up a side chair and sat down. John Marchand, if you don't mind, he said, gesturing to the seat next to Luke. Why don't we try this again, Luke? Luke offered a quick nod of compliance. How's your brother? Doing good? The sheriff asked. It seems like it. You still sweet on the pedal, girl? I guess. Try not to stick my nose into other people's business, Luke replied. Sheriff Hicks ignored the provocation. And how about you? I'm dandy. Why? Luke peered out the window, pretending to investigate the peacock parading in the yard, its feathers on display, and avoided eye contact. John Marchand knew Luke hated these questions. He hated them. People were always asking, and frankly, it was none of their goddamn business. If you say so, Hicks replied. But people are talking, Luke. Oh, yeah? People are saying you might be drinking a little too much. Maybe also driving a little too fast on the back roads. Luke rolled his eyes. Mm-hmm. John Marchand could sense his son's simmering impatience. We're all worried about you. Me, Tater, your pop. You know, with your ma being... Luke jumped to his feet, his shins banging on the side of the coffee table, and grabbed a duffel bag lying on the floor. If we're all gonna do is chit-chat, Sheriff, I think we're done here. I need to get to practice, he said, throwing the front door open and slamming it closed behind him. Luke, John Marchand half-heartedly called after his son. Let him go, the sheriff said. The blaze of light was blinding, and Earth felt like it was spinning out of control on its axis, gravity giving way. John Marchand's entire body floated through the air in slow motion. His head, neck, and limbs were fixed and unmovable, but he could feel a frantic pounding inside his chest. Voices followed, unintelligible at first, building to a symphony of howling screams and angry growls, interspersed with words and phrases, some of which he understood, and others he did not. The first words John Marchand could make out were, "Murderers! Whore!" and "He is mine!" soon followed. Angry growls surged from somewhere beneath his body, and zaps of electricity seared his insides as they flowed from his head to his toes. Then he heard a woman cry, "Go!" at the top of her lungs. A bell trilled in short bursts. John Marchand opened his eyes. He had fallen asleep in his armchair. It slowly registered that the telephone was ringing. He lifted the receiver. Mr. Andervald? The man said. Yes, this is he, John Marchand answered through the fog of sleep. Your son's been in an accident.
Scott, how long can you do that before your voice gets tired?
About 2 hours. I take breaks, but again, that's a good point. I think some people can do like 3 or 4 hours a day. I think you can build up a stamina. I think because I tend to perform and really go for it, as you see, that 1.5 to 2 hours a day is fine. I think that's a really good point actually, because I think some people, when I say burn out, but I'm sort of doing less now. I probably do 2 to 3 books a month, as I was doing 4 to 5 before, because I teach as well. So it's finding a balance that you doing the story credit, not overperforming, but giving it what it needs. And that's just depends on, some people don't give as much. They're much more subtle, and I can be. It just depends. Me, as Julia said, she listened and said, yes, this is the voice. There's so many times when people will say to me, I get heard from authors, I love what you did, but it's just not right for what I want. So, it's that voice that you have, the author has inside their head. And sometimes it's right and sometimes it's not. But yeah, it depends. But yeah, around about 2 hours, which is 3 or 4 hours, 5 hours over a day when I split it and obviously take breaks, etc.
And I'm also curious about your studio. You're not in the studio right now.
No.
What kind of a studio do you have? Is it a makeshift studio? Is it a professional studio?
Yeah, it's a professional studio, which cost, I don't know, probably about $6,000, and it was it's all set up with panels inside, so it's very, very it has a good continuity. With a sealed door and stuff. So then I've got my computer in there. The reason I'm out here now is just because my computer, I share the screen, but the camera's here, so I could be in there, you wouldn't be seeing me. And I just thought from this point of performance, it's not really you're not necessarily going to get that massive quality because we're on Zoom. So it's Yeah, it's a professional studio, which means that it can be raining outside and helicopter. If it's a helicopter right overhead, then yeah, I stop. But more often than not, certainly not the rain, it doesn't stop me. And it's, I would say because of the time it saved me, I think it's already paid for itself because I've been able to work where if I was in my studio here and it was raining, I couldn't. So yeah, the time it saved me has been great since I've had it.
Hmm.
I've had it about a year now.
It's quite an investment, but it sounds well worth it.
Oh yeah. Well, you have to be. I think that was the thing. As much as continuity, if you, as I say, people want that sense of the sound being very very crisp. It was good before, but you still have some processes on it, and to deaden and take a lot of mouth noise out and things like that. But again, it comes down to also an individual's EQ. So you get to know your voice. And what I did a lot of was listening to Audible and listening to people who I knew were good and thinking, okay, I can hear what they're doing with the sound there. There's a bit more bass, a bit more bottom end. Let's see if I can do that and emulate that. Um, Again, just trying to get that sense of continuity so people know if they're listening to me on another similar book, it may be a similar genre, but some people can follow the narrator as opposed to the author, which has happened a lot. It's happening more and more now.
Yeah, people hear a narrator they like, they can listen to for forever, and yeah, they follow them like they might an author.
Exactly.
So we did get another question that was posted before the event, and if you did post a question in that Google form, I will be sending you a Spotify download code. If you already have the book, go ahead and share that with a friend. That would be awesome. And I don't have the name, but someone asks about Liza. How do you imagine, and this is for Julia, Liza's story continued since settling into the ranch at Peacock Bend, having learned the Underworld story from Tater and presumably now met Junior. So we're talking about the character that starts everything off, and so what do you imagine her life ended up after she learned this story?
Well, if it's a soft ask of whether there's a sequel to this book, not yet conceived of, but I just imagine. So she's a musician. She's living in this area. I imagine she finds her way and hopefully finds out more about the past of the ranch and what brought her there. She was drawn there on. I don't want to give too much away, but she's drawn there for reasons that she can't explain, and then even more things she can't explain, happen to her when she's there, and so I imagine she stays put at least for a little while. She's trying to get out of as they say in the prologue, the melee of some drama or some scandal. It's not said what it is that she's experienced, and so she's laying low. So I imagine she lays low for quite some time. It's a nice place to be, sitting along the Medina River. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen.
Brad says, yes, it was a soft ask about a possible sequel.
Yeah. Um, I
Well,
think yeah, no sequel yet.
we just have a few minutes remaining, and I know this is something that Scott is adamant about, and that's about human narration. And it's interesting because as someone the publisher, it is a lot of money to produce an audiobook, but as you've seen, like Scott puts his a lot of talent, a lot of skill, a lot of experience into it. So if anything, he should get paid more. But it's tempting now. Every time I go to a distribution platform, they have you can just hit a button and AI will narrate the book in 5 minutes, and it's pretty much as simple as that. So Scott, can you talk a little bit about the value of human narration and why it will forever be better than anything AI will do?
Well, the one thing that AI won't be able to do is connect. I mean, by definition, it's artificial. And it may sound right, but you could hear the amount of accents that I was doing, and gender change. How's AI going to do that? And I mean, it may get to that point, but I think fundamentally, it's it's about intellectual property and it's about artists. I mean, you can be purist up to a point, but fundamentally, we want human narration, human people telling human stories. Because, I know for a fact some authors have had all of their IP taken off or used in AI engines. So, without any recourse, you look into the small print of the terms and conditions. I know Spotify were doing it where they said anything that's uploaded belongs to us. We Transfer have had it, that anything that's uploaded, we're going to use it for our engines. So it's absolutely imperative that we keep the narrations human, not just from a point of it's my livelihood, but it's more of a case of just the connection that we need, and we need to keep that connection. I think, post pandemic, more than ever. And the only reason that people are looking to use AI is profit. It's just money. They're not looking to tell stories. So this is what it's really important that we have legislation. And what's just happened, it's happened in Denmark, I think, in that they have now made legislation that every citizen has their image and voice protected by copyright. So it cannot be AI'd. And I've just been in touch with the Federation of Small Businesses over here and helped them as well. And they're recommending that that happens in this country. And it has to happen now, because if we don't, it will just, people will be abusing it until such time as it's too late to do anything about it. So certainly I know the big thing of SAG-AFTRA are obviously are very, very good. And Equity are somewhat trying to get in, on their coattails of saying there needs to be legislation. And if that's in place, it was ACX, we talked about of saying no AI voices. And, and if that changes, which it is changing, then it's about, I think, the challenge then is for narrators to be better than AI. And I've got to, as opposed to, and as much as purist it is, at a certain point, an author's going to say, actually, I'm just going to use AI for this. But I think it's detrimental. I think if someone's got their work like Julia has, it wants to be told properly by a human, and that is the best thing for everyone.
Yeah. Can I just share two moments that we had some back and forth about selections and sort of feedback I had in this? And one was a passage where Anna was having a moment, and I just said, she's going to be wounded with an edge here. She's not going to sound like the way and so having that arbitrated conversation with AI, I don't imagine would happen. And then in the beginning with the original character, it's like she's suspicious and she's sharp, but her mother has taught her from the day she could walk that you are always polite. And so that's that tension of saying, what the heck? But trying to be polite to this, like having that conversation to get the nuance of the line. I just don't see how that would have happened if I was talking to a bot.
Well, yeah, storytelling is one of the most human things we have, and there's a soul to it, and you can't get a soul from the artificial intelligence. Well, first of all, I want to congratulate Julia on the launch of the audiobook for The Wretched and Undone. I want to thank Scott for giving us his time and his talent and doing such a great job with this audiobook. I want to thank our audience for supporting us by being here today, by downloading the audiobook, by telling others about the audiobook. Please go on to Goodreads, leave a review wherever you leave your book reviews. And this has been a really fun event. So thank you, Julia. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And hope you have a good rest of the day. Thanks again for joining us.
Everyone, thanks for joining. Bye.
Bye-bye.